I'm Josh Harris, and you're listening to Clear and Loud, a podcast about the ideas, stories, and voices that are shaping our world.
The world's a really shitty place. I think the thing I hate the most about the world right now, aside from being completely dead inside, is social media. Social media is garbage, and I don't understand the point of it anymore. I was at a comedy show like this one, and it was a packed show, so they sat me next to a stranger. I was just watching the show, and the girl ordered a ginger ale, and when the server came, she realized she didn't have her wallet. So I was like, "Oh, I'll pay for your ginger ale." And then she was like, "Oh, let me Venmo you." And I was like, "No, it's $3. Just let me get it for you." And then she was like, "All right, well then let's follow each other on Instagram." And I was like, why am I being punished for doing something nice? Jesus Christ. Like, what is the point of this? What is the world coming to? I don't get it.
That was a clip from a performance by stand-up comic and my guest today, Charla Lauriston. Charla is not just a comedian, she's also a writer and director, the wordsmith who has weaved narratives for shows like Grand Crew on NBC and The Last OG, and the genius behind her own critically acclaimed web series, Clench and Release. Charla is from Haiti. She's lived in New York City, and now she splits her time between Vancouver, where I met her, and Los Angeles. Charla's wit cuts through the absurd minutia of everyday life with a matter-of-fact punch that will leave you laughing days afterward. And now, through her online course, Werking Writer School, she's using her Hollywood savvy and experience to train up a new generation of screenwriters. So stick around as we peel back the curtain on the world of TV writing, dive into the role of comedy in our culture, and who knows? You might even pick up a few tips for your future late night show debut. Here's Charla Lauriston. Charla, welcome to the Clear and Loud podcast.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I'm excited to be here.
When people find out that you're in comedy, do they try to impress you by being funny?
No, they usually try to get me. They usually tell me what should be in my set, even if they've never heard my comedy.
Is that right? Me, everybody has an opinion.
Everybody assumes that whatever is happening in their life is the funniest thing that could possibly be happening. Like if I'm like, in an office with people or wherever I am, they're like, "Oh, you should put this in your comedy. This is hilarious." And it's like not funny at all. Usually it's not funny at all. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's
fun.
It's great that everybody, is an expert in assuming that they can write your sets for you. That's great.
It is. And what's surprising is how not funny it usually is, because I do think regular life is the funniest thing. The people in my life, my friends are the funniest people, so I'm just like, there's tons of comedy, but whenever somebody calls it out, it's never actually what I would put in my set. I find it very funny. I'm like, oh, that's why you're not a comedian.
That's why I do this and you
hilarious.
Don't do this. When you were growing up, did you always have a love for humor, a sense of humor? Like, is that something your family pointed out about you?
Absolutely not. We briefly talked about this, Josh, that we both grew up very Christian.
Yes, that's
and that
true.
is in my comedy. But I was a very, very shy kid. I never talked in school. I was very much teacher's pet, always sat in the front of the class. I was not like a disruptor that sat in the back. Like to me, those kids were like insubordinates. You know what I mean? Disrespecting. Right.
So you weren't like the class clown that everyone was like, oh.
I was not. I was not even funny. I still don't think I'm that funny, which I know I'm funny. Like in a professional sense,
you are funny.
I know I'm funny. So Josh, don't get me wrong. I know I'm funny, but like even without my friend Camille, who I met in New York, to me, she doesn't do comedy at all by a mile. She has like a master's in political science. She works like, on campaigns and stuff. One of the smartest people I know. She's literally one of the funniest people I know. She's like, to me, a female Chris Rock. Like she's just like from the Bronx. She's Jamaican and Haitian. She's just one of the funniest people. Like, people that are just funny,
it's
like
true.
Just when you're hanging out with them.
Yeah.
a lot of my comedy friends are. I think maybe as I come out of my shell, if surprisingly, as a stand-up comedian, I'm still coming out of my shell as an adult, just because I grew up as such a shy kid. And now more and more I can see that I'm naturally funny. But I think what it really is that I just have a perspective, a point of view that is
Right.
funny. You know what I mean? I think I can
Right.
see, I'm very observant. That's one of the things that I got as, I think that's my superpower as from being a shy kid, was that I'm always observing, and I always thought everyone around me was just nuts. Just hilarious, like growing up in church, I thought everybody was nuts. Like as I got older, I realized, oh, adults are just nuts, and that's just what it is. And it's like,
It's an important
calling
thing to
that out.
realize. Yeah.
Yeah, all I'm doing is calling it out mostly, how nuts we all are. But yeah,
So
I
with
think
being
that's
a
funny.
writer, and then like a stand-up comic, like which of those came first? Like, did you get into one first and then the other?
I mean, stand-up came first. I started as an improviser in New York, and
Okay.
even that was, I had a deep, deep desire to do comedy, but I had just never been much of a performer. I did not grow up a theater kid. I very much I always had a part-time job. I always was doing sports. I was in like tennis. Like, I just wasn't like a theater kid, and like, I'm Haitian. I'm so culturally Haitian that like, I just thought I was going to go to college and become a nurse, and that would have been it. Like, it just didn't occur to me that I would do this for a living.
Right.
Even improv was something that I fell into because I had moved to New York and I didn't have any friends. And one of my good friends, Kenny, told me that he was an actor in LA. He had moved out to LA like 5 years before I moved to New York. And he said he had just taken an improv class and he made a lot of friends. So it was
Oh, that's
truly
so great.
like, I had wanted to do stand-up comedy, but I just fell into improv randomly, and because I didn't have any friends in New York. And then I took a level 0 improv class at the People's Improv Theater, and that was my first introduction to live performance, to improv, to comedy performance, to the
Oh my
comedy scene in
goodness.
New York. That was my
Yeah.
introduction to the comedy scene in New York. And thank God, it truly was a blessing to fall into improv,
So
because
it
I
just
don't
like
think I could have
unlocked
ever
a
done
whole
it.
it unlocked a whole part of you, huh?
It really did. I became
Amazing.
absolutely obsessed. I became obsessed with improv at the time. I don't do it anymore, but at the time I became fully obsessed with it. It just was so, I was so bad at it. I was so bad at it. And I was so scared to do it. But it was so like, there was something there. There was something there that I was like, oh, this is kind of what I've been looking for.
Mm,
And then doing improv gave me the confidence and the courage to do stand up. And then stand up became what I really, really like. Because I'm really a lone wolf. Improv is very much like a group thing. I don't like
right.
groups. I don't like group projects. I want to do it by myself.
This is why you
That's how I
played
am.
tennis in
This is why I
when you're
played
growing up.
tennis. And I
Yeah.
did not play doubles. I played singles. You know what I mean? So I just fell in love with stand up even more. And in general, the entertainment industry has been a garbage fire for somebody like me who comes from like very traditional work,
Right.
and just always having a 9 to 5 job. It's been, the entire time I've been a part of the industry, it's just been me trying to figure out how to relax and let the career happen and let things happen, because there's just no structure. There's just no like clear path in the way that like a traditional 9 to 5. So literally the other day I found myself wishing like I could just like get a job. I was just like, what if I just got like a regular job? Like, at
Just
the
because
DMV.
it's like a clear pathway, like you do this and then this happens, and if you work hard enough, this happens. Yeah.
And it's just work. It's just a job. I think it's just a job. I think it's very hard to unmarry myself from my job as a performer and an entertainer, because it's so much wrapped up in your personality. I think
Right.
I think it takes up to, there was a point of my life where being a comedian and just the nature of capitalism in the United States and Hollywood, like you just have to work a lot. And I just was like, I don't want work to be my whole identity. I don't want work to be something that I'm always on all the time. Like I lived in LA for a long time, and it's just like, it just feels like 24/7 work. And I think it stopped being fun.
Yeah.
You know, it stopped being fun at a certain point. It just becomes a job. And I'm going so deep so fast, Josh, but I'm just like,
No,
yeah,
it's
I have to
great.
really find what I enjoy about it, because
Yeah.
you know, it's sometimes it's like sometimes I just want to have a job and for it to stop at a certain
Right.
point.
Is that because it's like, because there's not the structure, it always feels like you could be doing more, like you could be making a connection, you could be
Absolutely.
trying to do another show.
Absolutely. And because there's not the structure, there is just not the, I guess, psychological sense of safety. You know, like I think there's so much psychologically that, you know, just like the precariousness and the lack of security and the lack of a clear direction. I mean, I do know that I don't think I could do anything else, clearly, since I'm still doing it. But because I've certainly thought about what else could I possibly do, and I've even tried to like go back into traditional work. I'm just realizing more and more that, like, as much as I love the security of traditional work, it's just not where I thrive. It's just not for me. Unfortunately, I wish I could just work at the DMV and I would be and I could be happy with that. You know. Just give me a job.
You would be hilarious there. Like, people would be like, I want to get in her line because she's funny.
That would be, you know, they haven't made a DMV show yet, unbelievably, even though there's probably the funniest people at the DMV.
Oh, seriously. Well, that might be the show you need to write and direct.
Maybe.
I mean, that's a great idea.
Unless a robot's doing it.
I'm really fascinated by this idea that places and cities have personalities.
Yes.
And you've lived in a lot of interesting places. And I'm just wondering if you would walk me through, like, the sense of humor or vibe in some of these places.
Yeah.
You're from Haiti, you lived in New York City, LA, now you live in Vancouver, you divide your time between LA and Vancouver. Like, how would you just kind of, you know, it doesn't have to be long, but just kind of walk me through some of these places? And
absolutely. Well, I would say that Haiti is, of course, an island, you know, so it's very island life. People are lackadaisical. I'm very much Haitian. Like, it's just, time is a theory. It's not real.
That's great.
You come when you come. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're on island time always. We're on Black people time or colored people, whatever you want to call it. Like CP, that's where that comes from. Just like
island time is a real thing. Like, even Vancouver Island, you get a different mindset.
It really is. It's just the slowness of the culture, and family is super important. Duty is really important. Community is really important.
Yes.
You know, so there's a lot of like, you know, I talk in my stand-up even about being like brought up, raised by the community. Like, there's a joke where I talk about how it's not just your parents that beat you, everybody beats you, because everybody's your parent. You know, it's the worst. Right. But
oh my
it's
goodness,
just, yeah, but it's just, I think Haitians are extremely warm people, extremely kind people. I think Haiti, unfortunately, has had a lot of poverty, and I think that it can make the culture a little bit savage. But I think, you know, there's such a softness. Exactly. It's like a very survivalist kind of thing. And I think we bring that along with us no matter where we go. But at the heart of it, I think Haitians are just like incredibly kind, warm people, beautiful people.
We need more Haitians in Vancouver. Let me just say that. We need
more Haitians. They're all in Toronto and Montreal. That's where they are.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't want to live over there, though. It's too cold. So...
Okay, what about New York City? What's
New York City, I think, is one of the friendliest places I've ever lived and ever been. I find New Yorkers, I lived there from 2010 to like 2017. And I just think that, like, I mean, I just have examples, like, you know, of a time I left my phone on the subway. Somebody answered it and, like, you know, came back to where I was, like, rode the train back to where I was to bring me my phone. Somebody let me borrow their phone. A stranger let me borrow their phone so I could call my phone, like, while I was doing it. Just a mess. Like, people helping you with directions. I actually find tourists very rude in New York because they come with the assumption. Yes, they come with this assumption that New Yorkers are very rude, that all, you know, whatever. And I have been shoved by tourists. I've just been like, you know, I've been irritated by tourists. They're super annoying. But New York City is I think New York is very, very different now since the pandemic. But the New York that I remember is very alive, very vibrant, a very like comics city. Like I think it's the mecca of comedy. It's like where people from all around the world come to make it as a comedian in New York City, go to the Comedy Store, go to all these places, you know. Sorry, the Comedy Store's in LA. But you know what I mean, like those comedy clubs there. But I think New York is, you know, some of the best food in the world, the best people in the world, the best performances, the best live comedy, the best live jazz, the best live music scene. Like everything's there. The food is amazing. The people are amazing. I love New York a lot.
I love New York City too. Yeah.
My only thing about New York is that it gets cold, and it's like a very physically uninviting place because it's like just concrete and like no trees and like
it's true. Yeah.
And it's expensive.
So
but
you went from did you go from New York to LA? Is that where you moved to?
I did. Yeah. I lived between New York and LA for like 2 years then we finally moved to LA. I think in like 2018 or something like that.
Okay.
LA, I honestly think is, okay, don't get me wrong when I say this, okay? I think they should burn LA down and start over. I think it's just a failure of a city. I think it's a garbage pile. I think it is absolutely not what it portrays itself as or pretends to be. I think, you know, so like my only, you know, expectation of LA or like was like Beverly Hills and like, you know, I'd only ever seen it on TV. The first time I ever went to LA was for a job. And I just could not believe the wealth inequality there. So I'm from Massachusetts. Like that's where I grew up mostly. Like after we moved from Haiti to Florida, then we moved to Massachusetts and we lived there. I moved to Massachusetts when I was 12 and I lived there for the majority of I would say my formative years, you know, Massachusetts. Okay. And I just think like Massachusetts is one of the best states in the country. Like in general, their education is fantastic. Their social safety net is fantastic. They have public housing. New York has public housing. LA is, I think, a genuine failure of a city. I think that like, wow, I'd never seen homelessness the way that I've seen it in LA. And there's also, they despise the poor in LA, or that is the impression that I got when I lived there. Of course, not everyone. There's a ton of people there who don't blame the actual poor for the homelessness. Like they understand that there are structural issues in LA that make the housing prices too high. We also have like in LA, oh my God, Josh, don't even get me into LA. Like LA is saved by good weather. It's saved by good food, fantastic food in LA. I can't complain about that. Mm-hmm. The comedy scene is not as, like in New York, the comedy scene is very experimental. It's very loose. It's very fun because everybody's there because they love stand-up comedy. But like when you're in LA, the comedy scene is it's much more vast. There's all kinds of people. It's like actors doing stand-up, storytellers.
Okay, interesting.
Like, you know, all kinds of people who aren't really pure. It's
not as like pure stand-up comedy.
It's not as pure stand-up comedy. The jokes are a little bit more, I think LA is different now too, because you've seen at least my wave of comics coming from New York to LA. Like when I feel like I was like one of the first in my cohort of comics in New York to go to LA. Now everybody I've ever known is in LA. Everyone I ever knew in New York is there. Yes.
Are they going there because of like getting into TV and movies and so on? Is that like the progression?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some in New York. There's like late night in New York, and there's a few shows that are written there, but the vast majority is in LA. But it's a wasteland. It's an absolute garbage hole of a place. That's how I feel about LA.
Now that brings us to Vancouver, which is kind of an odd card in the mix here. I feel like
absolutely.
What do you think of Vancouver?
I like Vancouver now. I would almost dare to say that I love Vancouver now. We moved here during the pandemic. I found it very cold. Of course, we moved here in like
Yeah.
January of the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely.
It
Wet
was
and
very
cold.
isolating. It was wet, cold. It was isolating. I had no friends. I only had my husband to talk to, which was just impossible. Like, just the worst. When all you have is your husband to talk to as your friend, it's just insane. So it was tough the first few years here. So we were here, I think we moved here in 2021. Yeah, we moved here in 2021. We've been here for 2 years now. And yeah, my first impression of Vancouver was not great because it was just cold and isolating, and I
Right.
found people not super warm.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have found, as the literal weather has warmed up, that people warm up.
It's so
That
true. Yeah.
it's true. And also I have a dog now, and like he gets so much action. Just like everyone wants to pet him. Everybody loves him. Everyone talks to me, whether they have a dog
Oh,
with them or
gosh.
not. It's insane.
It's such a wild way. I don't have
it's
a dog,
wild.
but when I watch people with dogs,
You can take my
it's like,
dog. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
So what I'm learning from this is
Yeah.
join an improv group and buy a dog, and you will
Buy a
have
dog.
friends.
You'll have
And
friends.
yeah.
You'll have friends. But Vancouver is beautiful. Vancouver is stunning. It's beautiful. The food is really fantastic. If you can tell, food is very important for my enjoyment of a place. It's literally the only
I'm
reason.
right there with you.
Yeah, why LA has not been discarded. It's because the food is good. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great rundown. That's
Yeah.
really good. I don't have a lot of I love stand-up comedy. I don't have a lot of like knowledge or understanding of the different styles or how like defined those are, but I'm just curious, like, how do you describe your kind of
For sure
style of stand-up comedy?
I definitely think it's very much based off of, like, I talk about growing up Haitian and my being married, and it's very like autobiographical.
Yeah.
It's very storytelly. I would say it's very observational.
Right.
I'm really influenced by Seinfeld and like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like,
yes.
the things that I talk about tend to be very small. Lately I've been talking about having a dog and what that's like, and like what it's like to be, in my mid 30s, and all of my friends in Vancouver are younger than me. I've not been able to find people my age to be friends with, which has been devastating. And it's just been like, I just can't believe the gulf between me and like a 28-year-old is insane. I'm just like, oh my God, what are you? I don't even know how to hang out with you guys anymore.
What is the deal with the generation? I feel like the gaps between generations are a bigger deal. Is that because of the internet? Like, we're so like hyper focused.
I think it might be the internet. I think it might be the internet. Or maybe it's just how it's always been, and we are just experiencing it now for the first time because we're in our adulthood, and this is how
might
adults
be true.
felt.
Like, did people obsess about the names of generations and like exactly which group they're in and how they relate to other generations? It feels more intense, but you're right. Maybe it's just because we're older.
I don't know. I think that's actually a really legitimate question. Like, I think the internet made like a definitive line, because like I don't think we ever talked about like boomers the way that we talk about them when we started talking about millennials. You know what I mean? Because but I don't know if that's because of the internet or I have no idea.
What do you think audiences are coming for when they go to a comedy show? I mean, obviously they're there to laugh, but like, even as you describe the style of your comedy and so on, like what's the human thing that's happening there with?
Yeah. I mean, I think people don't know this, but I think they think they come to just laugh, but I think they come actually to connect, because the things that get the biggest laughs are the things that people relate to.
Yeah.
The things that get the biggest laugh are the things that people are surprised by, or didn't see coming, or like,
Yes.
I think a lot of times what's interesting is that like, I feel like young young guys, whether they're black or white or whatever race, are always very like crossed arms whenever I get on stage, because they're like, she's gonna talk about like, she's not gonna be funny.
She's
gonna
different
talk
than
about
me.
like,
Yeah.
she's different than me, and she, you know what I mean. And then I
really
always
like your white guy voice.
Yeah,
Really...
this is just a dude voice. It's just like any dumb dude. That's how I imagine they talk. And
so they start out closed off because they
start off very closed off,
yeah.
And I assume it's because they think that I'm either going to talk about whatever. I don't care. Like if they think I'm going to talk about race, because some people want to hear that, So I don't know. But I just noticed that they're always like very stone face, even though they just laughed at stuff that I thought was not even funny. I've been watching, I'm just like, but I always find it fun to disarm those people, to like, poke fun at them, let their guard down, get the whatever, like, because the idea that you would be like, arms crossed and like, prove me wrong at a comedy show. It's a comedy show. It doesn't matter. Like none of this doesn't matter.
That's such an interesting insight. Like, when you laugh with people, it is a powerful way to connect with them.
It is.
And I feel like in a lot of society, we have our arms crossed just in general, We do. It's like, this person's going to come at me, or I'm different than them, or whatever it might be. And so there's something so vulnerable about laughter. Obviously, it's vulnerable for you to stand up and like talk about your life. But that moment of, it's actually such an exchange, right? It's such a human exchange.
It's such an exchange. I think it can be very cathartic. I think that's why a lot of comedians do it, because it's difficult, to be confident up there, particularly for somebody like me who's had a lot of anxiety, a lot of like, shyness, grown up very shy.
Yeah.
But I find it to be such a phenomenal exercise in connection.
Yeah.
I find my best shows to be when I let my guard down. Yeah. And I accept, I'm very into meditation and like just presence, because I think that is one of the few times when I'm fully present is when I'm on stage and I'm doing stand-up, because I have to be. And also because
you're so focused, right?
I'm so focused because I am very like forgetful, and I can be very air spacey, and I don't want to forget my jokes, but it's okay if I do, but I would rather not, so I have to really focus when I'm on stage, and I get into a real zone when I'm about to do a show. Because it's not about the audience. It's about me wanting to make sure I like hit my punchline and like don't forget a part so that it doesn't mess up my punchline. Like that's literally what my brain is trying to do to focus when I'm about to get on stage.
The other thing I'm thinking as you're talking is just how comedians are the ones who are still willing to say certain things.
Yeah.
Maybe the thing that people think but they'd never admit, which is another powerful form of connection.
Absolutely.
Like there's so much pressure and lots of different camps and lots of different political viewpoints to conform. And I feel like comedians are like this last bastion of like honesty in a sense.
Absolutely.
Which is a powerful form of connection as well. Like, oh, I'm not the only person that's thought that. Or
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting time, because, the foundation of comedy is truth. This is when you start an improv class at any school. One of the first things that you hear is about truth in comedy. What is funny? What is funny? It's the truth.
Really?
The truth is funny. Yes. Because
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that is one of the first things that you learn in a improv class is what is funny. You learn about truth in comedy. And what I find interesting about this time that we're in is that we don't all agree on what the truth is. And so if we don't share reality, or if we cease to share reality at some point, how do we have comedy? Or do you only have comedy for certain people, certain comedy for certain people? Because, honestly, I think the people who are like in the fake reality of, Biden didn't win or whatever, I actually think that they know that that's not the truth. And I
Mm,
actually think that there's other things going on, but
mm.
that's like, maybe that's another episode, Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I mean, even just the idea that there can be massive groups of people who have their
Yeah.
own version of
Reality.
reality, which
Hmm.
almost means they have to have their own, obviously they have
Everything.
their own TV channels, but they have to have their own comedians. It's like, what are
Yeah.
they willing to put
Yeah.
up with? And I think that's where you see the flashpoints,
Yeah.
Netflix specials, which are available to the whole spectrum of people. And a comedian steps up and says certain things that
Yeah.
put him in front of people who would not normally go listen
Yeah.
to that particular person.
Yeah.
That's
I
really
actually
interesting.
see much less politically charged comedy.
Mm,
Like unless you're watching like The Daily Show or like maybe
yeah.
a late night show, I don't think a lot of comics are going up. Even I have, stepped away from doing too many racially charged jokes.
Mm,
Like I had
hmm.
this one joke that I used to say about how I think it's up on Instagram or TikTok or something about how white stock has plummeted in the Nasdaq because of Trump, and just how like white people's value is really at rock bottom right now. And it's just like, to me that's hilarious. But
Right.
I said that in Texas. This was, I think, in 2018 and 2019, and it only got a good reception in Austin. It only got, like it
Okay.
depended on
Yeah.
where I was. When I went to Fort
For
Worth, it didn't
sure.
get as good of a
For
reaction
sure.
because there are certain white people who don't like that joke, and that is the fear. And so
It's maybe a little too close to
it's a little too
hitting it
close
too
to the
close to
truth.
home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And some truths
Exactly.
hurt, but the truth hurts sometimes. So I'm like, yeah, but
Well, I was
I
thinking
don't do
about,
that joke anymore.
is that right? Just because it was just too
I mean,
controversial.
it's old. Number one, it's old, so I don't do it anymore. It's gross. And number two, I just don't want the heat. I don't want the heat. I don't want anyone coming up to me after. I don't want to hear it. When my experience in Texas, it really varied, like
Yeah.
even certain places I did that joke in Austin, because I did like maybe 5 shows in Austin or something like that,
Hmm.
and different places where I did that joke, I got different reactions. I had this one ex-military guy come up to me afterwards, basically tell me that I was racist and not funny. It was just like a really
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
aggressive conversation. And
Hmm.
it's just like, I absolutely don't want to be having this conversation with you. Like, I don't want to argue with you. It was like Facebook in your face, like
Yeah.
somebody upset about something you've said and like wanting to have a really intense conversation about it. It's like, I 100% don't want to talk to you about race and
Right. Right.
like, it's like,
Well,
either you thought the joke was funny or you didn't,
right.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing because it's like there's sort of this unwritten rule that, you're allowed to make fun of your own ethnicity and you can make certain
Mhm.
jokes. I mean, I'm half Japanese, so I'll make jokes
Oh, no
about being
way.
Japanese or
I love that.
whatever.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to do that. Half of me is allowed to do
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And obviously there's an important place for being kind and respectful to other ethnicities, but then we really do lose something when there are all these things that we're not allowed to even poke fun at each other, So it's just
I
sad that you can't make that
Yeah.
joke without getting. It's like we should all be able to laugh at ourselves a little, I think.
I agree 100%, but I actually disagree about us only being able to make fun of our own race, because for a long time Black people could make fun of white people and it was actually like a part of a shtick. Like some comics, that's all they do.
Exactly. Well, I agree
Some
with you.
comics,
I think there's something. I think there's an observation
yes,
that we can't, whatever our race is, whatever our
yeah,
ethnicity, you don't completely see. There's a lot of humor there. You can see a lot of things, but then there are other things that you don't like to touch because maybe it
right,
touches a little too close to home. So it can be hilarious when someone else from the outside points out the
yeah.
obvious. So
Yeah. I really think the difference has been Trump. I really think like there's the jokes that I made before Trump and then the jokes that I made after Trump. Like
yeah.
after Trump, when I started making certain racial jokes, it was just very uneven, like in terms of how it was received.
Yeah.
And I think it was because a lot of people felt emboldened to say, I don't like that joke, or like you can't, or that's reverse racism. You can't make fun of white people, even though it's like, I definitely can, because I can make fun of anybody. You know what I mean? I can make fun of whoever I want, but
yeah,
I just don't want the heat sometimes. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't even want to. I don't want to. Or, and I might still make some joke like that, you know. I have made racial jokes in Vancouver that haven't gone over that great, you know.
Interesting.
But
well, let's move on to a less controversial topic. Let's talk about religion.
Yay! I love it.
I'm kidding.
I love it.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about how we met. We met at a co-working space.
Yeah.
And in a brief conversation, when I heard about what you do, this is what I love about having a podcast, because I can meet someone like you and be like, hey, will you come on my podcast? Because I want to learn more about your view of the world. And so I didn't know anything about you except that you were a writer and a comic and so on. And then I started following you on Instagram and saw some of your stand-up comedy. I thought you were talented. I think you're funny. And
Thank
then
you
in some of your, some of the clips that you shared, you're talking about growing up in a very religious environment, which I had no idea that we shared that background. What has that journey been like, and how, how did you decide to start working into some of your comedy, and how does that land with audiences? What's the reaction there?
It's mixed as well. Mixed as well. But that's fun. I think it's funner when it's mixed. I don't want everyone agreeing all the time.
Right,
I don't think it should be that way. But I grew up super religious. Haitians are very my grandfather was very Catholic. My grandmother was Baptist. She won. The rest of our family is Baptist. So it just felt like a war for our souls, apparently.
If you're Baptist, definitely that's how you view it.
Absolutely. And I grew up in a church where my uncle was a pastor. He didn't have any children of his own. Him and his wife didn't have any children of his own. So we were very much the children of the church, if that makes sense. It just kind of felt like we were like the church's family, because our uncle was the pastor. He didn't have any children. We were always involved in everything. We were in Bible study and choir, and everything that church did, we were doing it. I sang in church since I was very young. I just grew up.
Was this in Massachusetts?
This was in
primarily
Massachusetts.
Where this was? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this was in Hyde Park, Massachusetts. That's a very Haitian neighborhood in outside of Boston. And that's where my uncle's church was. His church is no longer. I'm pretty sure his church is no longer there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure his church is no longer there. But it was just I just grew up very, very religious. And the thing that ever since I was a kid, I'm very much like my dad in this way. Like my dad, he doesn't just believe anything anyone tells him. He scrutinizes everything anyone tells him, and he's very anti-religion, even though he's grown up like every Haitian in church, because that's just part of the culture. You go to church.
Yeah.
My dad's always been he doesn't like church people. And my mom is just like extremely religious to the point of just like not making any sense.
Talk about opposites attracting.
Absolute opposites. It's how I feel about at least the Haitian churches that I've gone to. I always found them, and I don't even know if I grew up mostly in the Haitian churches, and I did try to explore other churches outside of Haitian churches after I left the Haitian church. But I just found it to be very hypocritical, like people saying one thing in church and living a very different way. And I find a lot of churches to be very homophobic. The churches that I grew up in were extremely homophobic. Yeah, imagine like going to college, and making some of my first gay friends, and then going to church and then hearing about, gays going to hell. Like it was a very fire and brimstone, like kind of church, like that hell gospel that people like to preach about. So it was never like about warmth and kindness and giving and like, You know, I just did not like I didn't like the culture of the church because it was all talk and no action. It was all about talking about being holy, but not actually being holy, not actually treating people in a holy way, you know, not treating people in a way that I felt made them feel seen and accepted and welcomed. It was very unwelcoming, and I didn't like that about the Haitian church. And I don't like that about many churches. I know a lot of that's not every church. I know not all churches are like that, absolutely. But the churches that I grew up in were very exclusive, very unwelcoming, very judgmental, very, I thought, not charitable to certain people. They were very charitable amongst themselves. And Haitians are, like I said, are wonderful people, kind people, a lot of charity amongst each other.
Yeah.
But I just thought that, like, if they just thought that you were a sinner or something like that, then you'd be really excluded and kind of, you know, excommunicated. And I just thought it could be very
just
cruel.
kind of gets turned off.
Exactly. It just gets turned off. Any mistake. And it's like, that's literally not what Christ, like that's literally the whole point of Christ is forgiveness and a second chance and acceptance and welcoming. And I just didn't agree with that. And so that really made it hard for me to respect what I was hearing in church.
Yeah.
You know, it just felt that it was a lot of BS and a lot of like hypocrisy. And I didn't respect a lot of the adults as a teenager and as a college student. By the time I got to teenage college student years, I really started to think for myself and really was just like, I had a real sense of what I thought was right and wrong. And I didn't like how the church. No, I just didn't like how the church, or the only thing that was right was what God said was right, and things that were wrong was what God said were wrong. And I'm just like, but some things are wrong because they're wrong, not because, or right because they're right, and not because, you know, of a very, very old book or your interpretation of a very, very old book says. You know, it's just like, open your eyes and live in the present moment and treat this person today with the dignity and respect that I think Christ would have treated people with. If this is the Christ that you say he is, then this is what he would do. So I basically, after I left home for college, like after college, I moved to New York, and that was the first time I stopped going to church. And it happened very swiftly. Like, I had been going to church. I had moved to New York, and I had been like looking for different churches. I've been visiting. I went to like the Brooklyn Tabernacle Church. Yeah. They have the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir over there. Literally fantastic singers. Like, you know, New York has, they're famous. New York has a phenomenal church scene. There's so many historical churches, historically Black churches. I visited a bunch of them. I really tried to like find my own church family and my own church home. And then one day I had started doing comedy. I had found another community. I had found, I think, what was my real community. You know, like these were the thinkers. These were the family that I had kind of been looking for, or like the community that I'd been looking for. And to me, the values of comics matched my values so much more than the Christians that I had grown up with. So I literally just woke up one Sunday, and was too tired to go to church. It was the best day of my life. And I never went back to church. I refused to go to church. Like, I refused to spend a Sunday. Now that I've experienced the joy of not going to church, I refuse to go. So that's where I am spiritually.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, of whether or not it was like a distinct moment. And it sounds like it was this one Sunday.
It was one Sunday, but I would say obviously that was the beginning of it did. It was the end of my church life, like going to church and being involved in church. But I think that like my spirituality is only now being established.
Interesting.
Only now, like deep into my 30s, is my spirituality something that I can relate to, something that I can point to in any way. Yeah.
How does that take shape for you? Like, how do you measure that part of your life?
You know, what's interesting is that what I found was that I think the reason I never connected was with church was because I didn't recognize it. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know, absolutely community, for sure. A wonderful community, in a church. But what I realize now, after like tons of therapy, tons of like, self, examination and just like self seeking, is, to me, spirituality is authenticity. Like, the closer that I get to who I am and accepting that fully, the closer I feel to any semblance of spirituality, because I feel like this is the most at home in my body I've ever felt. This is the most
That's
at home
beautiful.
on earth I've ever felt. It is the most connected I've ever felt to other people. It's the most safe I've ever felt with connection. I think that this is spirituality now, in my understanding of it. Like, this is what I
That's
am.
wonderful.
Yeah, like that's what I'm feeling is spiritual to me.
Which would make so much sense why the community of fellow comedians would feel so much more in line with that.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Because comedians, another thing is I realize is like, I hate bullshit. I hate BS. I don't respect it. I don't recognize it. I don't like it. I hate it. And like, I found in the churches that I grew up with that people lie and that they walk around lying, and they pretend all the time. And comedians, or the vast majority of comedians I know, tell the truth. The vast majority of comedians I know call a thing. They call a spade a spade. They don't bullshit themselves. They don't bullshit other people. Some of them do, of course. But like, I think it's hard to be funny if you are not self-aware, and it's hard to be funny if you're not comfortable with telling the truth.
That's a really good insight. Yeah, there's something about the structure of religious communities. It's true in other communities outside of religion, but where you have a group where certain behavior is required or you will be excluded.
Yes.
Especially when that gets into all these, categories of piety that all humans fail in or whatever. You're going to start having fakeness, right? Like, it's
Absolutely.
like,
Absolutely.
if people know I do this, then they're going to reject me. I won't tell them I do that. I'm going to act, you know what I mean? Like, it encourages that kind of fakeness, I think.
It does. It rewards fakeness, and it like punishes realness, really.
It's true.
I think it really just like, it puts people in a position.
And I mean, I think, to be fair, one of my experiences in stepping away from organized religion, and I'm in a similar place where I'm trying to, establish a spirituality and figure out what that looks like. But one of the lessons I'm learning is humans do this shit everywhere. You know what I mean?
Everywhere.
It's not just in evangelical Christianity. It's there are all kinds of groups that get set up where it's like, you're accepted if you do these things, and then you're going to have people who are being hypocritical and playing games. But it's very concentrated in religion, I would say. I think it's very, very concentrated. Moving on to your writing career, which I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
What is the process of writing for TV like? I'm just wondering if that is harder to be putting it in another character's mouth, or easier. Like, what different parts of creativity does that tap into for you?
Sure. So I feel like it took me years to understand what that job was about. And now I have a simple explanation. And the explanation is, your job as a TV writer, the way that you create a show, is by figuring out what the showrunner and his vision, or his or her vision, is, and doing your best to help them execute that as a writer on staff. Because, it's very hard to have many different visions going at the same time.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the showrunner is to have a singular vision, and for literally everybody around them to rally around them and to try to execute to their best of their ability. And the wonderful thing that I like about TV, there's a lot of things that I don't like about TV, but the thing that I do love about TV is the people. and that, you know, I've had the privilege to work on really great shows, and these are just fantastic professionals, like from the top down, you know, like from the person who's driving the van to set, you know, to the
So
person
many
who
moving
is
parts, so many
there's just
participants.
so many moving parts,
Wow.
like to the prop person who's trying to like get the right, you know, prop for the scene. They'll bring you different options of like a briefcase or a hat or like whatever, and like to get your vision across as well as possible. And I think it's just such a big production. Literally, it is such a big production. It's so much coordination. There's so much hard work that goes into it. I really respect the people. So the way that the sausage is made is straight up hard work. It's not glamorous. It's late. It's early. It's long. It's difficult because you're trying to get a lot of people on one page. You know, you're trying to get a lot of people to contribute to a singular vision. And so that means that like it takes time for us to learn the voice of the showrunner and the voice that he has for these characters, he or she. My most recent showrunner was a man, so I'll refer as he, but it just takes a lot of
that term showrunner, like is that a term that's specific to TV? Like, you know, I understand
I've never heard it anywhere. Other than in theater or in TV. That's where I've heard it.
But that's the person who is calling the shots in terms of here's how he wants the story to unfold.
Yes. I essentially see each television show as like as a pop-up corporation. Like basically after a TV show gets greenlit, you essentially like establish a company so that insurance can go under that company, all the things that they have to rent, the equipment, like the wardrobe, every single thing goes under this entity, and the showrunner is the CEO. They are quite literally responsible for everything. Like not like the physical production, but like everything you see on screen, they had to approve. So they either have to be fantastic. What is the word? I forgot. I'm blanking on a word. See, they either have to be fantastic delegators or they have to be madly able to make a million decisions a day, literally, from the thing that the person is wearing.
So you have different styles of showrunners who have like really powerful lieutenants and others that are just like dictators or something.
Who are dictators and who want to be a part, who you can't write without them if they're not in the room.
Whoa.
My last showrunner was probably one of the best managers that I've ever worked with, because that's the other thing is like a lot of these showrunners, this is a very like CEO position, but you know, writers rise up to showrunner, and sometimes without any kind of real managerial experience. And so that's when you get these people who don't really know how to delegate. They don't really know how to like let go a little bit and like just oversee and make sure that they're making the big top decisions instead of like a million little decisions. Because it truly is like a million little decisions every day. You know?
Well, just from a writing perspective and the story of that's unfolding in a show, I guess I don't really understand how this works. Like, you know, a show gets greenlit, you know, it goes into production. Is the arc of that story that happens in a particular season, is that already defined? And then each
lot of times, no.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, a lot of times the showrunner will come in with an idea of how he would like the season to go, where he thinks the characters end up. But it's like the vast majority of the times I've been in a room is very much just like an idea. It is not written in stone. No, because they want to have the input of the writer's room because there could be a better idea. It's one of the things I love the most about writing and writers' rooms and comedy as well on stage, because it's super democratic. The best idea wins. The best joke gets the laugh. Like, it's that simple. It's not, unless the showrunner is very like egotistical and only their jokes are funny or only their ideas are funny, because you got a bunch of that as well. Like, you have a bunch of narcissists who don't actually really want a writer's room. They just want to do their
So
own thing.
the writer's room is the team of people that are actually writing the story and the dialogue that's going to be used in each episode.
Yes. So the way that usually a writer's room works is that you'll start with a blue sky period, like the first 2 weeks of the writer's room. Let's say you have a 20-week writer's room. So that's like half a year, 6 months, 5 months or something like that. And the first 2 or so weeks is blue skying. And this just means like just big picture ideas of like where characters end up, story ideas of like where what story could we have for this character? What romance could we have? What job story could we have?
So
what
fun.
What character, what story between these two characters or whatever. Like we're really just pitching wildly. And then after that 2-week period of blue skying, the showrunner starts to pull some of those ideas that he likes and is like, all right, let's try to break these stories. Let's try to do sometimes they'll call it soft break, so like maybe you have one because during this whole time we're communicating with the studio, with the network, whatever studio owns the show, whatever network owns the show. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of people involved and they need to know every step of the way where we're going or where we think we're going.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
We might have to do, so maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the writer's room, we might have to do what's called just like, what do you call them? Oh, I think we call them goldies in this particular writer's room, but it's literally just like 3 or 4 pages, or even sometimes 1 or 2 pages of just a general gist of the story of episode 1.
Like here's where we're headed.
Yeah, here's where we're headed. While the studio or network is reading that, we're working on episode 2. This kind of short synopsis for episode 2. We get back their notes on episode 1. They like this, they didn't like this. We use their notes as a guide, but not as an absolute. And we use the best of our abilities based off of what we want for the show to be like, all right, let's fully break this story. That means that we beat out the story beat by beat. We write a full outline. In this particular room, we did that as a room. We did it together. So sometimes in some rooms you're doing that.
I'm trying to
delegate.
picture that. If you,
I know.
So you're taking different characters, or you're like, here's this, you guys work on this dialogue or something like that. Like writing by all together, it sounds so complicated.
Well, sometimes, so like, let's say there's 10 writers and you split a room. Like, let's say after we get the notes back for the episode 1 short synopsis, half the room, 5 people, will work on beating out or breaking the story based off of the guidelines from those notes. And then the second half, the other 5 people, will work on the short synopsis for episode 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So sometimes you definitely can break up the room to get more things done. And then let's say, after episode 1, they have a 8-page outline. So this is an 8-page outline. This is a full episode. They get, the whole room, those 5 people write that outline together on one laptop. Usually there's like a higher level writer at the keyboard taking the notes, making That's what I was trying to picture. Exactly.
He's getting all this input from the 4 other people.
Yeah, and it's true. And you are getting a lot of input, and you are, as a writer, encouraged to participate and contribute as much as possible. So sometimes that can be very overwhelming for the person listening. But once again, your instincts as a comedian, as a writer, take over, and you know what the best idea is. It's the one that got the biggest laugh. It's the one that was the most interesting. It's the one that makes the most sense. It's the one that helps fix the whole rest of the story. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, like whether it's like the setting that we're trying to figure out that would be best for the story, is it like, in Grand Crew, we had like an awards dinner that one of our, the season already came out, so it's no spoilers. An awards dinner, and we had to figure out what was happening at that awards dinner. What is the game of the episode? What is the game of every scene? Like, because you got to figure out why it has to be funny every step of the way. So how can we make it funny? By making this character as interesting as possible, by making this setting as interesting as possible, by making their conversation as specific as possible. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a lot of decisions that you're making as a lead writer in a room when you're listening to people pitch.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be pitching too at some point. And that's literally all we're doing is we're just trying to come up with the best idea wins. It really is that democratic.
I love that collaboration.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. I mean, I've seen, like clips of stuff being read and, as the actors are going around reading something, but you don't really see the writers portrayed.
It's true. It's true. I kind of want to, it's one of my goals with the Werking Writer that I started is to just really pull back.
This is the online course that you're teaching,
this is the
right?
online course
teach
that
people
I'm teaching.
how to actually write for shows.
I do, because there's a lot of screenwriting classes. There's a ton of screenwriting classes. And I think that those classes are, of course, really important. You really need to know how to write a script. That is a skill that you have to be in a writer's room. But what the hilarious thing is, the irony is that once you get into a writer's room, you're probably writing maybe 30% of the time. I would say 70% of the time you're pitching. 70%. The vast majority of your job is idea contribution. And then at the same time,
it's not this solo pursuit of like, let me write out this script and then bring it to the
once in a while it is. And sometimes you will have to write scenes. We, in this particular room, what we did was something called Frankensteining a script. We would assign scenes from the outline. So we've written out an 8-page outline, which is how much a half-hour script, that's how much a full outline for a half-hour script is. Yeah. And so we split that up. So maybe I get the first 3 scenes and I write out those scenes and I try to make them as funny as possible. And then the next writer, because there's probably 30 scenes, 25 to 30 scenes in a half-hour script. Each scene is about a minute and a half or something like that.
Okay.
So let's say there's 10 writers or 8 writers. You know what I mean? You split it up that way, or maybe sometimes the higher level writers get a little bit more scenes, or maybe even sometimes the lower level writers get a little bit more. So they have more writing, they get more experience writing. And the higher level writers, it's their job to kind of just make sure it all flows together and things like that. So
are there moments on a show? Are there moments on a show, almost like a sports team, where somebody's just hot, like so and so is just on fire, and 100%. We're just like
100%. It's taken a lot of
winning, right?
Checking my ego, because I always want to be the hottest one in the room, but I again have been lucky enough to work with really funny people, people who are just extremely sharp, extremely fast, extremely funny. So. Yeah.
And so what is what's the most kind of intense moment of this whole process? Is it when the showrunner reads the script for the first time? Is it the actors reading it? Or what's the moment as a writer where you're like, oh boy, okay, I hope they like this?
I think there's so many intense moments.
I bet.
And it depends on the room that you're in. I've been in a room where it wasn't as collaborative and you very much had to write, I had to write a whole script on my own. Okay. And I was the lowest level writer in the room. And I remember they got my script back and everybody goes off to read it. And I'm having I'm shitting bricks. I'm having a heart attack, and it's a page 1 rewrite. It's they're we can't use any of this. It's just a big delete. I think I almost had a mental break after that. I was so
rough.
devastated. Rough. Yeah, but that's what happens. I'm not the first person to have a page 1 rewrite, but it was my first experience with that. And in that particular room, I was the lowest level writer. There were a lot of really experienced writers and every other writer did great. When they had to turn in their script by themselves. Yeah. The writer that turned in their script after me, literally my showrunner was perfect. He was this is perfect. No notes, no changes. Boy. My shit was a page 1 rewrite. It was horrible. But, and then sometimes I've been in some rooms where the table read can be very, a big deal because sometimes let's
is
say
the table read the actors actually
the actors gather, the network gathers, the studio gathers. So I was working on a show for Netflix and Sony. So the Sony executives and the Netflix executives would literally be at the table read and all of the actors would be at the table read and they literally would stop production and make everyone come to the table read because I actually think the table read is a little bit of a remnant of the past, like pre-Zoom, like, you know, people like to be able to do it in person in one room because they try to kind of make it like a stand-up show. Basically, they're trying to get a live reaction to the reading of this script.
Interesting.
But I actually feel like it's a remnant of the past, honestly. Like, I genuinely feel like people don't mind doing it on Zoom because then they don't have to leave their offices. They don't have to drive from Santa Monica to like Hollywood to come do this freaking table read. You know, like, I think.
Would you be sad if you lost that though? Is it like a remnant of the past that's kind of powerful and special, like the old Hollywood or something?
This is going to sound terrible. I don't think there is anything special about Hollywood. I think Hollywood thinks it's very special. I think, no, I don't think we miss anything. I think I don't have to drive from Santa Monica. Like, I think it makes it more efficient.
This is coming from a person who hates LA.
I'm like, if you understood LA at all in the drive, then you would know that
I've
it's
driven
so
in
much
LA
easier.
And it is terrible. Yeah, it's
so just
terrible.
do Zoom. I mean, there's definitely people who are purists and they want that reaction of the live audience. And maybe if it was my show, maybe if I had a show, I'd also want a live audience. But I feel as a employee.
Well, it's
like
funny. I mean, I have no experience in this. It makes so much sense if it's a live, you know, production like a play or something. But the majority of people will be taking this in on a screen.
100%. That's why so I don't think it's super. To me, I always thought they were like high pressure, high stress. We're always like working late the night before a table read to get the table read ready. I feel like there's a lot of like hurry up and wait and like, you know, everything's on fire when literally nothing's on fire. Like, this is not an emergency room. This is a television set. And I think it's because I come from like real jobs. Like I'm a Haitian and I'm such an immigrant.
Is that sense of emergency just because everything is costing so much? Like every minute.
I think that's what it's always been. I think that's always been what it is. Like it's a super expensive undertaking. You know, these shows are millions of dollars per episode.
Yeah.
It's incredibly expensive. And I am aware of that. And I know that is why everything's treated like it's on fire. But the truth is, like, there's plenty of money. I mean, there's a lot of high stress jobs because of how expensive things are because of money. Yeah. Yeah, that's why.
Have you ever had a moment at a table read where an actor read one of your lines and you were like, it's funny, you just didn't read it funny?
Absolutely. But I'm like, everybody ham it up for this table read because live performance is really different from a television performance. You know, like when we are at a table read, if somebody's reading something very quietly or like without good timing, then it's very hard to make it funny in a live setting. I think it's hard to make a television script particularly funny in a live setting, I think, but that's just me. Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, let's touch on a serious topic for a moment. Sure. The writer's strike that's taking place. Yeah. If anybody listening to all that writers do to deliver all the great entertainment that we enjoy, if they're not realizing how deserving these writers are to be well compensated, I don't know what we can do for them. But I'm just curious how the writer's strike is affecting you and, you know, what this moment, I mean, hopefully by the time people hear this, it will be over, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have felt that the industry has been shifting since I entered it. Like the first show I wrote on was Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. And when I was hired onto that show, it was going to be airing on NBC. And by the time I left that show, like literally in the middle of the writer's room season, some suits came in and it was now a Netflix show.
Oh, wow.
So literally the first show that I ever went on was quite literally at the beginning of like the streaming takeover. Yeah. And I remember at that time saying, I think TV is dead. Like, obviously content is not dead. Obviously, like we'll still be watching TV, but I don't think we're going to be watching it linearly on so broadcast TV is going away, whether I think broadcast likes it or not. Like even broadcast television stations are having to have streaming channels, so.
And that's at the heart of the strike because of the ways that writers are compensated for streaming.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. But even before this particular strike happened, I remember when I sold my first show, when you sell a television show, you don't own the show as the creator of the show. Showrunners who showrun, who pitch original ideas, these are their ideas, unless they had there are a few examples. For example, like the creator of Walking Dead, that was like it had existing IP for that show. I think it was a comic book.
Okay.
So that showrunner retains, some ownership at least of that show.
Yeah.
Or of that idea. But like the vast majority of us, when we sell a TV show, we essentially become employees of our own show. And this is not even what's at the heart of the like that we've given away. We've so we essentially get to profit. There's profit participation that you get to do in the form of residuals.
Yeah. But that's not necessarily a lot, is it? It's not
a lot, and
it
has become more minimal as we've shifted to streaming because they're counting the views differently. And there's just more eyes spread out across streaming than there was on when there were like much fewer broadcast channels or much fewer cable channels. Now it's like, I think I don't know how long this strike is going to go on. I can't predict that. But I do think that it's legitimate in terms of the writers' concerns, especially with ChatGPT coming out. The studios have never been particularly the studios, honestly, they are, they do exploit free writing from not just writers, but that is a culture in Hollywood where they really exploit free work. And it doesn't matter the level of writer that you're at. Like I've been, even at co-producer level, producer level of writing, because there's different, you start as a staff writer, then you become a story editor, an executive story editor, then co-producer, then whatever. It's you literally go up the ranks, but it's just, I think it's the same fight that's at the heart of a lot of the labor movement in America right now. When you see a lot of these, Starbucks unionizing, it's truly because across the American economy, you've seen a degradation of wages, wages not keeping up with inflation, exploitation of workers, and I think particularly in Hollywood, when they make you feel like you got your shot, but it's you're working.
Nobody wants to speak up because there's somebody else that'll take your place.
That'll take your place. And that's very real. Somebody else will take your place, but at the same time, I definitely think this is a skilled job. You gotta have skill to do it. It's a hard job. It's long hours. It's incredibly mentally taxing. It takes a lot of mental energy. And it's a fun job. It's fantastic, but it's the same fight that's across the labor movement in America. It is just that these corporations are too powerful. I don't think anybody thinks that they won't replace writers with ChatGPT. I can see it so clearly, them halving the size of a writer's room and making us feed scripts into an AI and having two
honestly,
or three writers
some of the shows I've watched on Netflix in a couple of years, I already think they're using a really bad
100%
AI.
100%.
So
100%.
I'm not sure what's going on.
100%.
But it's such an interesting thing because good writing is the key to the great shows that we all love and enjoy. You know what I mean? I feel like the credit for from a public's perception, the stars get so much of the credit for something because they're the ones that are seen, but it's the writing that makes these stories
And
like
even the
alive.
stars know,
Yeah,
if you don't have a good writer, you don't have a good show. If you don't have a good writer, you don't have a good movie.
exactly. Yeah.
And that's it. Full stop. I don't care what you do. You can put the biggest star, you can put the best director. If the writing is shit, the movie is
Hmm.
shit, the show is shit. That is it. And we know it, they know it. They can posture as much as they want. Right now
Hmm.
the studios are saying that they have plenty of backlog, but as far as I can tell, nobody's auditioning. Shows have been shut down.
Yeah.
There's no late night, and it won't continue until we get a fair deal. And I don't know how long it'll take to get a fair deal. And of course,
Yeah.
writers are going to suffer. You know, it sucks, but I think it's an incredibly necessary fight, and I think it's like now or never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was just learning a little bit about the writer's strike, and it does seem that they've been sort of using the excuse of, oh, streaming is so new, we can't change things, but it's not new. It's very established now, and
It's not even just
writers need to
that.
be taken care of.
It's not even just that. I genuinely think it is across the economy that these
Mm,
corporations like have just become too powerful. Like they
mm,
can you imagine, Josh, you don't pay any taxes, and then as soon as your bottom line isn't as big as you'd like it to be, you just fire people. Like
yeah,
that is just that is just a legitimate business
right.
move. Like to just fire thousands of
Tens of
people
thousands of people in these big,
to
yeah,
meet
tech companies.
your
Hmm.
bottom line. It doesn't change the CEO compensation. It doesn't change anything about the way that you're doing your business strategy. Like
Mm,
these corporations do not care about people. That is clear. They don't care about the
hmm.
government. They get to write their own laws. They have too much power. That is truly what it is. Like, and particularly in an age of AI, I think people need protections
Hmm.
right now, because I genuinely think that like if I lived in like Europe, if I was like in Switzerland or something, I
Yeah.
don't think I would be as nervous. But because the United States is this like Frankenstein of capitalism, where
Mm,
corporations get social welfare and people don't.
hmm.
um I just think that I think you're going to continue to see it. You're seeing it with nurses, you're seeing it with teachers, you're seeing it with all kinds of people across the economy. And Hollywood, like I said, it seems glamorous, but it's just another job. Whether I don't care who you
Yeah.
are, whether you're an actor or
Hmm.
director, it is it is a hustle. It's a slog. It is a job.
Yeah.
It can be fun, but it can also be stressful. It can also be late nights, early morning. Like it is
Well,
work.
it's really helpful that you're
Yeah.
drawing the connections of what's happening in the economy on a broader level, and
Yeah.
I think it's almost like because there's glamour in Hollywood, it's maybe easy for people to no pun intended write off writers and not feel it in the
Yeah.
same way that they might be like,
Yeah.
oh well, this industry, that's a hard job, but it's like it's a job that's takes a lot of
It's a
work and
job. And
deserves fair pay, and yeah.
absolutely. And there is a lot of struggle that comes with being an artist. There's a
Hmm.
lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of not pursuing stability, not
Hmm.
pursuing, you know, n- a, a consistent career trajectory. Like you really are, it's really a crapshoot. Like I could have done
Yeah.
it. I could have moved to New York, quit my job in Boston, moved to New York, and never gotten a, to become a TV writer. It could have been that simple for me. There's thousands of people that do it. I have tons of friends, who don't staff on television shows, who are
Is it
not
sometimes
able.
just pure luck? You get your foot in the door, and that's I
I
mean,
think it's a combination of luck and hard work. I actually genuinely think that putting your work out into the world is a really important way to get staffed on a television show. At least it
yeah.
was when I was coming up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same kind of things as branding and marketing. Like, in my course I teach people, a lot of people are really nervous about networking, but
Yeah.
in Hollywood there's no real LinkedIn really for Hollywood. There's no real like job board. The only way that you get
It's all
jobs is
kind of
if people
interpersonal connection.
it's interpersonal connections. It's about people knowing who you are and what you do and what to
Mm.
seek you out for. So it's like, if you aren't telling people who you are and what you do, they can't hire you. And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I know people who are like, I can't get hired. And it's like, what do you do? Like, where's the work? Like, at least as a stand-up, you know what my point of view is. You know what my voice
Yeah.
is like. I
Mm-hmm.
put out a web series. How I would execute an idea. This is
Yeah.
what got me my jobs. And I think that's what gets people jobs. Like, they write a script that has a point of view, that has
Right.
clarity, that is compelling and like readable. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually not a mystery how to get a job. I think people just don't actually realize that it's harder than it is actually hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Mm-hmm.
actually super competitive. It's
And
really
it's not just
competitive.
sitting around waiting for someone to open a door. You
Never.
really have to hustle to.
You gotta hustle.
Yeah.
You gotta put your stuff. You gotta put your foot in the door. You
Yeah.
gotta put your foot in the door.
So tell me the name of the course again.
It's called the Werking Writer School,
The Working Writer School.
and it's a career-focused online course and community. So we have monthly mentor sessions. So there's a 5-week course that is the base of the course, and I teach networking. I teach how to pitch, because that is a huge part of being a TV writer. I teach the business of Hollywood.
That's brilliant. I love
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
I'm
It's like
blanking
not
on my
just
own
giving
course.
it's like
Yeah.
giving them street smarts, it sounds like.
It is. It's to me, what I found the worst part about being a writer was that even after you break in, nobody knows anything. Like, I think it's just
wow.
like, and everybody treats it like it's not a job. Like, it's like some, like, even your reps, your managers, your agents, like, everybody treats it like it's just like some cool, like, creative thing or whatever. But it's like, you're a freelancer. You
Yeah.
sell your ideas.
You're your own CEO.
You're your
right?
own
Like,
CEO.
yeah.
You're the boss of your own company, and you
Yeah.
must produce work all the time,
Mhm.
regularly, so that
It's a
people know who
different
you
mindset.
are and
Yeah.
what you do. It's a different mindset. And you have to, I also teach how to get a manager, how to work with your manager and agents and reps, because that's another thing. A lot of people think it's just about getting a manager, but it's like, how do you even, half of us don't even know how to work with them. We don't know what a manager does versus what an agent does. Like, and that's like, I
so
remember
good.
yeah, I remember I wanted to fire my manager, and I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't know what to do. And it was because I had this perspective that I worked for them, like that they were getting me jobs. But the truth of the matter
Wow.
is, no, they don't get you a single job. You get your jobs. Your work gets you your job.
So they need to be doing what you need them to be doing.
What you need them to be doing. And there doesn't need to be this fear-based relationship where it's all about what they're doing for you, what they can do for you. They don't have your career in their hands. They never did. And it's especially not with the internet being what it is. You can truly, build an audience, become your own brand. Like, ultimately, they're facilitators, and they're very important. And having a good one is really important. But they are not your boss, and you do not.
That's so good.
That's really what it is. It's like, I genuinely, I felt like there are so many screenwriting courses, but where's the course for when you become a screenwriter, or just to know how to navigate the industry, period? And that's what the Working Writer School is.
Oh, that's awesome. Where are you finding your students, or how are they finding you?
So I had to do, I just started, I was off of social media for 3 years, and I just got back on.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah. When I first was starting the course, I really just sent out, because I still had my email list. And I just sent out an email saying this is what I was doing. And I had like 12 or 15 signups or something like that for the first round. And then we did it again, and now it's fully online. So cool. And I'm just doing as much as I can to get the word out. Yeah. Because I have 0 social media following, but now I have some because I'm back out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that it exists, and I think there's so many there's so many teaching courses that are sort of like this weird kind of gatekeeping thing where it's like, we'll help you get in,
Yeah.
but you're saying if there's no training or knowledge about what the actual industry is, and not just the kind of textbook learning, but like the real way things work. I mean, that always exists in any industry. I feel like it's like the thing they teach you in school and then the way it actually works. And it sounds like you're giving them a glimpse of the way it actually works as a screenwriter.
I really feel like I'm just giving you like a straight up I think it's especially important now because the industry is changing so much.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's harder, for a new person coming in to really I think the whole industry in general can be very sink or swim. And I think it doesn't have to be that way. I think that it could make the experience of a lot of writers so much easier. And not easier like it's not going to be competitive, like it's not going to be difficult. I just mean that there's a lot of unnecessary difficulty in the lack of access to information about things like how do I network? How do I manage? How do I work with my manager? How do I pitch? How do I, I just think that there are basic things that people need to know so that they can swim,
Right.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Well, the last question I have is, what are you reading and what are you watching that you like?
Ooh, that I like.
That you like. Well, what do you think one of the best things on TV is? Streaming TV or
Josh,
wherever.
This
TV.
is going to be terrible.
Oh no,
this is going to be really terrible.
Am I not allowed to ask you this question? Does this get you in trouble?
I think you have to ask me because I'm a TV writer, and of course I am always watching something.
Yeah.
But I think like I watch mostly reality shows. Like this is terrible.
Do you really?
Right now I'm rewatching the most recent episode of The Real Housewives of New Jersey. Teresa and her family are having a real hard time. She's about to get married for the second time.
Now let me ask you a question. Is it because you're allowed to turn your writer's brain off and you don't have to be critiquing other writers?
It's 100% the reason.
Oh, that's so
funny. It's also just because like, I don't know, like I think reality TV is it's horrible and it's fantastic at the same time. Like I'm going to be watching Selling Sunset, and I was watching like, what's that Netflix, Love is Blind. Love is Blind was an absolute garbage fire, these last two seasons.
In the best sense of the
best sense of the word. Love is Blind is actually a show that I don't know if it should exist like just out of just being a decent human being. Like I don't know if it's good for us as a society, that show, but I watched it. So
that is hilarious. What do you think of the Kardashians? You watched Keeping Up with the Kardashians?
Of course I think they're brilliant. Yeah. I think they started the whole social media as an empire thing. I think really they created influencism. Yeah, I think they democratized celebrity. I think they broke their way into the Met Gala. I have absolute respect for Kris Jenner. I think she's a boss bitch, and I hope she becomes my manager one day.
Oh my goodness!
Kris Jenner for president.
Chris, somebody who knows Kris, please send this podcast.
Please,
to her.
I'm a huge fan of Kris Jenner. She has a course on Masterclass about branding. She's fantastic.
She's a sharp lady.
She's a sharpshooter. I love Kris Jenner.
It runs in the family.
Yeah. I am watching an actual show. I am watching This Is Us. I'm on season 6. I'm on the very last season on Netflix.
I've never watched This Is Us. I've not had the emotional energy to. Yeah.
I was like, this show's not going to make me cry, because I don't respect tearjerkers. I think that they are manipulative.
So you had your arms crossed.
Yeah, I had my arms crossed.
You were like,
it's okay for me to do it. It's not okay for other people to do it. White men in particular, Josh. I can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I had my arms crossed for This Is Us. I love it. It's a fantastic show. I cry every episode.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
That's what I'm watching.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then what about a book that you're enjoying?
I do read a lot. I haven't read.
What's the book version of reality TV? I'm wondering.
I do read
romance
personally, and I don't know. I don't know what my brain is into. Personally, I read a lot of self-help. I read a lot of self-help books.
Yeah.
Because, we started this conversation off, talking a little bit about spirituality and like authenticity and finding yourself and being okay with who you are and things like that. And that's really the journey I've been on over the last few years. And one of my favorite books from that period was Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. Fantastic book. I also love the book Not Nice by Aziz Gazipura. I'm a professional people pleaser and it's destroyed my life. And Not Nice is a wonderful book if you're a people pleaser.
Oh, I need to read that.
Yeah, I think so many of us do. Aziz Gazipura, Not Nice, fantastic book. And I'm just trying to think of I just found Chris Hedges. He's like a Pulitzer winning journalist. And I just found his Substack and I've been reading that. I'm reading random things. I read a lot of political news.
Getting like different.
Yeah.
I would imagine that that's like so important as a writer and a stand-up comic to get lots of different sources, right? Just getting all kinds of stuff.
But I'm a political junkie. Like I used to work for Senator Gillibrand in New York City. She's a senator from New York. And that was the first job that I had when I moved to New York. I have a background in politics. Like I used to intern for the Congressional Black Caucus when I was in college. I interned in Washington, D.C. So I had aspirations of either being a lawyer or some sort of, political operative or something like that. So I'm super interested in politics, in what is happening. I read a lot of The Economist and just The Atlantic and The Guardian and New York Times, of course.
That's fantastic.
I'm a bit of a news junkie, which I don't think is great. I think that's probably why I watch a lot of reality TV shows, because I just feel
your brain a little
just
bit,
to
right?
unplug my brain from the realities of what's happening, because reality shows are the fakest shows on TV. They're so
true entertainment, right?
Yeah. True entertainment, deeply entertaining. Deeply entertaining indeed.
Well, Charla, I've loved this conversation so much.
So much fun.
If there's ever a time that you and your partner are tired of all these I don't know, Gen Z millennial friends, and you want hang out with some older people, my girlfriend and I would love to take you guys out for dinner.
Josh,
hang
I'm
out
desperate
in Vancouver
for an adult hang. I'm desperate. I can't hang with these 25-year-olds. They took me to a queer rave. I've been talking about it in stand-up. You got to come to a show. Come to a show and listen to me complain about this.
I would love to. The last thing I want to ask you is, I think it would be really fun at the top of this podcast to play a clip from one of your stand-up clips from Instagram. Which do you think I should play, or which would you like me to play?
By far, yeah, you should play Friends on Instagram. That one, because that's gotten 80K views.
Okay, Friends on Instagram. So
by far my biggest clip.
The people who have listened to this podcast will have heard this at the beginning of it. Okay. And this is the moment where they find out that you chose to have it start out the show. That's great.
I love it. That's fun. I love it.
That was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on.
So much fun. You better actually hang out with me, Josh.
It's going to happen. I promise.
Right.
I promise. Thanks for listening to the Clear and Loud podcast. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Our producer is Pam Cameron, and this episode contains music by Jeremy Yaddo at Music for Podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a boost by subscribing or leaving a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen. We'd also love your feedback on today's episode. Or if you have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode or a guest you'd like us to consider, email us at hello@clearandloud.com. You can also shoot us a direct message on Instagram. Our handle is @clearandloud. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.